The holiest site on the planet holds its darkest secret. Recently, an archaeological team did the impossible. They explored beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount, a place where digging is strictly forbidden. Using advanced AI to analyze data from ground-penetrating radar, they expected to find remnants of Solomon's temple. What they actually found has sent shockwaves through the highest levels of government and religion. A hidden chamber, an ancient warning, and evidence of a power that predates everything we thought we knew. The discovery is so profound it's being called worse than anyone could have possibly feared. Ground zero of faith. The reason is simple but incredibly complicated. Here, history, religion, and modern politics crash into each other like a slow-motion car wreck that has been happening for centuries. What many overlooked is that this isn't a new problem. Back in the 1860s, a bold British officer named Charles Warren arrived in Jerusalem. He was working for the Palestine Exploration Fund, and his goal was to find physical proof of the ancient temples described in the Bible. Of course, even back then, he couldn't just show up with a shovel and start digging on the Temple Mount. That would have caused an uproar. So, Warren decided to go around the problem by going under it. With ropes, lanterns, and a small team, he descended into dark shafts and explored a hidden network of narrow tunnels and ancient water cisterns that snaked through the bedrock beneath the old city. One of his most famous discoveries is a deep shaft now named after him, Warren's Shaft. Some believe King David's own soldiers used a similar path to sneak into the city and capture it thousands of years ago. Warren's daring explorations proved that a secret world existed right under everyone's feet, but even he hit a wall he couldn't get past. The Temple Mount itself was untouchable. The religious authorities and local rulers refused to allow a single stone to be disturbed. It was clear then, just as it is now, that this ground was too holy to be treated like a normal archaeological site. From Warren's time to today, the Temple Mount has remained a no-dig zone. For Jewish people, this site is the most sacred place in the world. It's where the glorious First Temple of Solomon and later the Second Temple once stood. Deep inside the temple was a chamber known as the Holy of Holies, the most sacred room, where the very presence of God was believed to dwell. The thing nobody tells you is that after all this time, no one knows the exact location of that sacred chamber. Because of this uncertainty, many religious leaders forbid Jewish people from even walking on the mount. If someone were to accidentally step on the ground where the Holy of Holies once stood, it would be a profound act of disrespect. For this reason, digging into the mount is simply unthinkable. For Muslims, the site is just as holy. It is home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the stunning Golden Dome of the Rock. It's from this very spot, known as the Noble Sanctuary, that Muslims believe the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during his night journey. An Islamic religious trust known as the Waqf has been the guardian of the mount for centuries. From their point of view, allowing outside archaeologists to dig into the ground would be a deep insult to their faith. It could easily be seen as an attempt to undermine their history and their connection to the holy site, so the mount remains sealed, its history locked away. As if faith wasn't a big enough hurdle, the Temple Mount is also a political powder keg waiting to explode. Since the Six-Day War in 1967, the site has been under Israeli security control, but the Islamic Waqf continues to manage the religious affairs on the mount itself. This creates an incredibly tense balance of power. Israel holds the keys to the gates, but the Waqf runs the house. For the most part, this fragile agreement has prevented all-out conflict, but everyone knows it could break at any moment. A single misplaced stone or a controversial political statement could spark protests and violence. In this atmosphere, archaeology is no longer just a science. It becomes a weapon. Every piece of broken pottery, every ancient coin, every newly discovered wall could be used as political proof by one side to strengthen its claim to the land while weakening the others. Because of all this, the Temple Mount has become the forbidden ground of archaeology. It holds the memories of Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike. But while history waits just below the surface, the delicate balance of faith and politics on top keeps the door tightly shut. But what if a door nobody knew existed was just found? The Sifting Project's surprise. For decades, archaeologists could only dream of what lay beneath the Temple Mount. The ground was too holy, the politics too dangerous. It seemed the secrets of the first and second temples would remain buried forever. Then, in the late 1990s, something happened that was first seen as a tragedy, but soon turned into the single greatest opportunity in the history of Jerusalem archaeology. It all started with an illegal construction project. Without any archaeological supervision, tons and tons of soil, nearly 400 truckloads, were dug up from the Temple Mount and unceremoniously dumped in the nearby Kidron Valley. For historians and archaeologists, it was a nightmare. They knew that this soil wasn't just dirt. It was a priceless time capsule filled with thousands of years of history, now mixed together and thrown away like trash. It seemed like a catastrophic loss. All that history, all those potential clues to the past were now scattered and seemingly lost forever. But a couple of visionary archaeologists, Gabriel Barquet and Zaki Devira, refused to give up. They came up with a brilliantly simple idea. If they couldn't dig on the Temple Mount, why not dig through the soil that had been taken from it? In 2004, they launched the Temple Mount Sifting Project. They brought the dumped soil to a special facility in Jerusalem and set up a massive outdoor laboratory. The process was straightforward. Buckets of the soil were poured onto mesh screens. Then, using hoses, the dirt was washed away with water. What remained on the screens was a wet mix of stones, pebbles, and countless tiny artifacts. The best part of the project was that anyone could volunteer to help. Families, tourists, students, and locals all came to join the hunt. People who had never held a trowel in their lives were now on the front lines of discovery. Children on school field trips would shout with excitement as they spotted an ancient coin. Travelers from across the world would carefully wash dirt from a piece of pottery that hadn't been touched in 2,000 years. Ordinary people were suddenly doing the work of archaeologists, and the results were absolutely mind-blowing. Over the years, the project uncovered more than 500,000 artifacts. That's 500,000 tiny pieces of history saved from the dump. Many of these finds came from the First Temple period, the era of King Solomon. There were thousands of broken pieces of pottery, remnants of the bowls, jugs, and cooking pots used in daily life. There were fragments of ancient oil lamps that once lit up homes and sacred spaces. What's more, they found small clay seals, known as bullae, that were used to stamp documents. In a huge wow factor discovery, some of these seals were stamped with the names of priestly families mentioned in the Bible. Suddenly, these weren't just stories on a page. These were real people who had lived and worked at the temple. The sifting project proved that even discarded dirt can tell incredible stories. They found bronze incense shovels used in temple rituals, jewelry, stone weights, and even fragments of stone vessels that were used during the Second Temple period because they were believed to be immune to ritual impurity. The finds stretched across all of history. There were artifacts from the Israelite, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, Crusader, and Ottoman periods. The project showed without a doubt that the Temple Mount was never an empty hill. It was a bustling center of worship, trade, and life for thousands of years. It was a true crossroads of the world. What began as a destructive act turned into an archaeological miracle. The Temple Mount itself was still off limits, but its soil had finally spoken. It told stories of kings and priests, of soldiers and merchants, and of ordinary families. But as incredible as these 500,000 artifacts were, they only hinted at the much larger secrets that were still sealed deep underground. Those secrets were about to be revealed without ever breaking ground. Scanners in the Holy Land. The Temple Mount Sifting Project was a massive success, proving that history could be found even in discarded soil. But the biggest questions remained unanswered. What was still down there, deep beneath the bedrock? For more than a century, the answer was locked away. But that was about to change. Between the years 2021 and 2024, a team of scientists and archaeologists turned to a powerful new tool, one that didn't need picks or shovels. They turned to artificial intelligence. The plan was to use a technology called ground penetrating radar, or GPR. This technology works by sending radio waves deep into the earth. When these waves hit an object, like a stone wall, an empty space, or a different type of soil, they bounce back. A computer then reads these returning signals and creates a kind of X-ray image of what's underground. On its own, GPR is useful, but the images can be fuzzy and hard to interpret. This is where the AI came in. The team fed the AI thousands of hours of data, including the new radar scans and old historical maps, some of which were drawn by British surveyors almost 100 years ago. These old maps gave the AI clues about known tunnels, cisterns, and other structures that had been documented in the past. The AI's job was to compare the new radar scans with the old maps, looking for patterns that a human eye might miss. By layering the modern data on top of the historical records, hidden details began to pop into focus with stunning clarity. A similar technique had already been used in Egypt to find hidden chambers inside the Great Pyramid of Giza without ever moving a single stone. Now, that same futuristic approach was being applied to the most sensitive archaeological site on Earth. The results were immediate and astonishing. The radar picked up clear, precise images of man-made structures deep beneath the mount. There were long, straight walls, perfectly angled passages, and large, empty spaces that were clearly not natural formations. Some of these patterns lined up perfectly with areas marked on the old British Mandate maps, which was a huge relief. It confirmed that the technology was working accurately. Places that had only been described in old drawings were now appearing on their screens as clear digital images. But then came the truly heart-stopping moment. The AI began to flag anomalies. It found structures and chambers that had never been recorded on any map. It revealed voids large enough to be rooms, connected by a network of narrow corridors. To put it mildly, the team was looking at a blueprint of a hidden world. One of the first major discoveries was a small Byzantine chapel tucked away deep underground. The scans showed its walls, its curved apse where an altar would have stood, and even faint traces of crosses that had been carved into the stone. Inscriptions in Greek suggested that Christian pilgrims had gathered there nearly 1,600 years ago. Digging deeper both literally and digitally, the scans picked up something even older, right below the chapel's foundation. Massive, perfectly cut stones known as ashlar blocks. Their style and incredible size matched the construction techniques from the time of King Solomon. These stones were powerful evidence of a major structure that stood on the mount long before King Herod expanded it. But the biggest surprise was a vast and complex water system. The radar revealed a web of cisterns, channels, and aqueducts that was far larger and more sophisticated than anyone had ever imagined. Flow control systems suggested the builders were masters of engineering, able to regulate water pressure and volume. Analysis of mineral deposits dated parts of this system all the way back to the era of the First Temple. This digital excavation was a monumental breakthrough. For the first time, scientists were exploring the mount's hidden layers without sparking a political or religious conflict. The scans had opened a new chapter, but they had also opened the door to a much darker mystery. The AI had found something else, an area that didn't match anything in the historical record. It was a perfectly circular chamber, sealed shut. What was waiting inside was worse than anyone thought possible. Solomon's dark secret. The AI-powered scans had revealed a hidden world beneath the Temple Mount. A lost chapel, ancient stones, and a massive water system were all incredible finds. But one discovery stood apart from all the rest. It didn't fit the historical narrative, and it sent a chill down the spine of every scientist who saw the data. It was a discovery that would reframe everything, suggesting the Temple Mount's most ancient purpose was not one of worship, but of containment. The discovery started as a strange anomaly in the scans near the southern edge of the mount. At first, it just looked like another thick stone wall, but when the AI cross-referenced it with geological data and old maps, the image became terrifyingly clear. It wasn't just a wall, it was a sealed stone entrance, and it had been intentionally hidden, untouched for what looked like thousands of years. The entrance led into a perfectly circular chamber about 10 feet across, carved directly out of the solid bedrock. What was truly bizarre was its flawless condition. There were no cracks, no signs of collapse from earthquakes that had rocked Jerusalem for millennia. It was as if the chamber existed outside of time. Inside, the scans detected several objects. In the center of the room sat a large basin, also carved from a single block of rock. Unlike other ceremonial basins found, the residue detected inside wasn't just ash. It contained traces of unusual metals, including lead and mercury, substances often used in ancient binding rituals. Scattered around the basin were clay oil lamps, but they were different from the thousands of others found by the Sifting Project. They were simpler, cruder, and belonged to a much older period, predating the First Temple by centuries. Faint traces of incense were detected, but the chemical analysis showed it was made from plants known for their sedative, not celebratory properties. The most disturbing discovery, however, was not an object. It was an inscription carved into the curved wall of the chamber. It was written in a very early form of Paleo-Hebrew, one of the oldest alphabets known in the region. When linguists translated the faint, spidery letters, a wave of confusion and fear spread through the research team. The inscription did not say anything about a divine presence. It didn't mention God or holiness. Instead, the translation was a chillingly simple warning. It read, "Here the warden stands guard. Do not open." This was the WTF moment that changed everything. The team had been searching for the Holy of Holies, the most sacred place in ancient Judaism. Instead, they had found what looked like a prison cell or a containment chamber, guarded by someone or something called the warden. All the pieces suddenly clicked into place in the worst possible way. The unusual metals in the basin, the sedative incense, the extreme age of the lamps, and now this horrifying inscription. It all pointed to a single terrifying conclusion. This chamber wasn't built to keep people out. It was built to keep something in. The scientists were now confronted with a possibility that was far worse than they had ever imagined. What if the original purpose of this sacred hill wasn't to build a temple to God? What if the temple was built on top of this spot for another reason entirely, to act as a seal, a holy barrier to keep whatever was trapped in this chamber from ever escaping? The idea was so radical it bordered on madness. Yet the physical evidence from the scans was undeniable. The Temple Mount wasn't just a place of worship, it was a prison. This discovery didn't just challenge the historical record, it threatened to shatter the very foundations of faith for billions of people. The holiest place on earth might have been built on top of its most terrifying secret. The AI had revealed a truth that was never meant to be found. What lies beneath belief? The revelation of the sealed chamber and its ominous inscription has thrown the worlds of archaeology and theology into chaos. The discovery is so new and so profoundly shocking that it is being kept under the tightest security, known only to a handful of researchers and government officials. But the implications are already beginning to leak out, and they are worse than anyone could have possibly thought. People watching this are looking for a mystery, so let's expand the possibilities and talk down to earth about what this all means. Is it possible that everything happened just as the scans suggest? Are we missing a key detail? The thing is, if this is true, it forces us to ask a question that is almost too terrifying to consider. Who or what is the warden? And what exactly is it guarding? The oldest texts from the ancient Near East, texts that predate the Bible, are filled with stories of powerful non-human entities, beings of immense power that were sometimes seen as gods and other times as demons. These cultures all shared a belief that certain locations on Earth were special, places where the veil between our world and another was thin. What if the Temple Mount is one of those places? This new discovery opens up a number of truly wild possibilities. One idea is that the chamber is a prison for an ancient entity. Maybe the early inhabitants of Jerusalem encountered something they couldn't defeat, so they trapped it deep in the bedrock instead. The inscription, "Here the warden stands guard," might refer to a lineage of priests or guardians whose job, for generations, was to maintain the seal and keep the entity contained. In this scenario, the first temple wasn't just built for worship. It was built as a massive, spiritually fortified capstone on top of a prison. The daily rituals, the sacrifices, the prayers, all of it might have been part of a complex system designed to strengthen the seal. Another, even stranger possibility is that the chamber isn't a prison, but a gateway. The warden wouldn't be a guard in the traditional sense, but more like a gatekeeper, controlling access to another realm or dimension. The thing nobody tells you is that many ancient cultures believed in such portals. If that's the case, the history of the Temple Mount becomes a story of controlling that gateway. The construction of the temples could have been an attempt to either harness its power or to permanently shut it down. The worse than we thought aspect of the title becomes very real here. If this discovery were made public, the fallout would be catastrophic. For millennia, Jerusalem has been a center of monotheistic faith, the belief in one God. This discovery suggests that a much older, darker, and more complex power lies at its very foundation. It would introduce a pagan or occult element into the heart of the world's most sacred monotheistic site. It would challenge the core narratives of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all at once. The conflict over who owns the Temple Mount would seem like a schoolyard argument compared to the fight over what to do with a sealed supernatural chamber. Would some groups demand it be opened? Would others insist it remain sealed at all costs? The potential for a global holy war is not an exaggeration. Think about it. We are talking about a physical discovery that could validate the most ancient myths of gods and monsters. Are we missing a key detail here? Or did a piece of technology, an AI, just stumble upon a truth that humanity was never supposed to know? The chamber remains sealed, a silent testament to a history we are only just beginning to understand. The warden, whoever or whatever it is, continues its ancient watch. And we are left with the chilling realization that the story of the Temple Mount might not be about what humanity built there, but about what humanity was trying to keep buried. The secrets of the Temple Mount are only just beginning to surface. What do you think is inside the sealed chamber? Is this proof of an ancient power, or is there another explanation? Let us know your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more journeys into the unknown.